Robert Fondry, and he served in the First Gulf War in Somalia and achieved the rank of captain. We are recording this on November 28th, 2012, and I am Anna Hickey conducting the interview, and there is no relation.
Correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Fondry, talk about where you grew up and a little bit about your family.
Well, I grew up, born in Vermont, grew up in Vermont, Alabama, and New Jersey.
You said you were an Army brat earlier. You're
right.
used to the traveling and
right.
the Army lifestyle.
Right. And I enjoyed that, and that's something that the men in my family on my dad's side and my mom's side were all involved in the military at one point or another, and this is just something that was expected of me, and I took it as an honor to be able to serve and help protect my country.
So how did you get involved in the First Gulf War?
Well, I was already in the military. I was in the Navy during Vietnam. The Navy sent me to college, and once I graduated, I got a commission.
Where did you graduate from?
I graduated from the University of Vermont.
Okay.
With a degree in nursing, and thank you, Navy, for paying for that. The Army, in its infinite wisdom, had sent me to the operating room course, and then I was stationed at Fitzsimmons for the didactic portion of it, and Walter Reed for the clinical portion, and then they assigned me to Fort Carson in Colorado Springs. That was in '89. I started there. While I was stationed there, the Gulf War happened, and we were deployed in support of the Gulf War with the 10th MASH, and I was in charge of the sterile processing department for the 10th MASH, as well as being an operating room nurse.
Okay. So then, what was being in charge of the operating room like? Or the sterile?
Sterile processing. It's my job to make sure that the surgeons and the OR personnel had the supplies and sterile instruments to do surgery on combat casualties. We were the only unit that I'm aware of that was able to go from a convoy situation to set up our operating rooms in our hospital and be able to receive casualties to all 4 operating beds. And we did that from a moving condition in blackout operation. We did it in 100 minutes. And we took great pride in doing that because, we knew that if we had to set up for real, somebody needed our skills.
Right. Okay. And then what was that for, the First Gulf War?
First Gulf War.
And then when did you actually go overseas?
We deployed for the First Gulf War January before the ground offensive started. And
what was that like for you? Were you expecting it, or?
Well, we had been preparing because Iraq invaded Kuwait, and in the spring, I think, or early summer, before the ground offensive started, and we had been training through the summer in MOP gear, meaning mission-oriented protective posture, the chemical suits with the protective mask and all that. We had been training through the summer so we could get an idea of what it was going to be like wearing all that gear during the heat. We expected it to be hot there. So we got a taste of it. But one of the things that shocked us when we got over there in January was there was water on the ground and it was frozen over in the morning. We never expected to see ice, in Saudi Arabia.
Right.
So that was kind of neat. But there was no clouds to speak of, so the heat would dissipate and over during the night, and because there were no clouds, you could see a star pattern. There's no clouds, no smog, no nothing. It was clear sky. You could see billions of stars. It was just neat. You got a detail over there that we don't get here.
Mm-hmm.
No light pollution, nothing. It was neat. So that.
What was Saudi Arabia like living conditions wise?
Well, we were first assigned when we flew into King Fahd Airfield. We stayed at a compound called Cement City. It was a cement factory compound, and we had the tents were already set up there. They were nomad style tents that the locals had set up, and then we had to dig our foxhole outside our tent. And when it rained, and it does rain in Saudi Arabia, they would fill up with water. So the water didn't stay there long, but it lasted about a week before it would seep through the soil.
And how long were you in Saudi Arabia?
We were one of the last medical units in. We get there, I think it was the 4th of January, and we were one of the first medical units out. We left mid-May. And the reason being, our commanding officer, Colonel Hughes Service, a West Point grad, he had prepared and knew and understood what would happen. And he told us that, if we get our gear cleaned up and had it ready to be turned in, rather than having to wait, there would be a unit that couldn't get their gear clean and turned in. So they would look for another unit that was ready. And so we were ready. And so we instead of being, our order of return to the United States would have kept us there about a year. But because we were ready to go, we had all of our stuff cleaned and turned in, they let us come home early.
Oh, wow.
So it was kind of neat.
What was a typical day like for you in Saudi Arabia?
A typical day, well, the closest bathroom was, I'm starting from when you get up. The closest bathroom was about a half a mile away. And it was a porta-john. They had a bunch of porta-johns. And then, so we would go visit the facilities, get cleaned up a little bit, and then go to chow. They'd come back, and a lot of what we were doing while we were waiting for our equipment to come by ship was a lot of downtime. We had opportunities to read and to try and learn a little Arabic. Mm-hmm. I took it upon myself to learn how to operate a forklift, to move supplies around. I was bored. I wanted to do stuff, and I wanted to help out in some way. And so I learned how to operate a forklift. I got checked out on all the vehicles that were available: a Humvee, a deuce and a half, a 5-ton truck, and I got my military license to drive those things. And I was looking for other things. As part of a team, every night we had teams of people that manned what was known as the Scud Watch. When Saddam was launching Scuds at us, there was somebody at the headquarters building for the compound that we were on who had a walkie-talkie and could communicate with somebody back in our area that we were bivouacked in, and it would be, we would get an early warning, because the headquarters would get the warning that there's an inbound Scud, and the guy there would radio it over to the unit to let us know there's an inbound scud. So we would go to MOP 4, Mission Oriented Protective Posture 4, meaning full chemical suit, protective mask, and all that, and just wait for the all clear. Now, first couple of times, we were told, to go to MOP 4. It's tough to breathe in that protective mask or with that protective mask on. And the easiest thing to make your breathing easier is to try and lay down and go to sleep. You can't sleep with that stuff on, but that makes your breathing easier because your stress is down, you're not moving around, your oxygen demand goes down, and so it's easier to breathe. But we had practiced running, marching, and all that stuff at Fort Carson before deployment, so we had an idea what it was like, but still.
Were you scared?
Not until the first scud came in. A Patriot battery took that scud out above our compound, and Saddam had launched the scud at the port of Dammam, and like I say, the Patriot battery took it out, and pieces of that scud landed in our compound, and our chemical stuff is screaming, and I know that the likelihood that I'm in a highly contaminated chemical environment is pretty good at that point. So, in blackout conditions, the middle of the night, waking up from a sound sleep or light sleep, depending on how you want to look at it, because you never got any good sleep there. I got my protective mask on, and I'm thinking to myself, what am I doing here? This is not nuts. I could be dead now. And then I remembered what my mom and my brother told me about, before I step out into eternity, I better know who Jesus is. Otherwise, I'm not going to like where I wake up. And so I was highly motivated that night to find out who Jesus was, and because I needed to know. I needed to get some things settled.
How'd you find out?
There's the only group of people over there that were having services every Sunday were the Mormons. So I went to the Mormon Services, and they handed me a King James Bible, and I started reading. I read through the Bible a couple of times while I was there, and I continued to go to the services. Now, we moved from Cement City to a logistics base near the town of Rafah, about 30 minutes south and west of the town of Rafah. They had services there. We had services in Iraq. And I went to all of them. I was motivated. I wanted to know who Jesus was, because he paid the price for my sin, and I owe him a lot. And I'm grateful that he allowed me to continue to live. I counted up I should be dead about a dozen times right now, and he's still not finished with me. So I'm grateful for every opportunity that he gives me to continue on.
So in Saudi Arabia, when you guys would get the wounded soldiers, right?
Right.
What was like the worst experiences of that?
Well,
did you see people close to death?
Yes. We never had to set up our operating room for the 10th MASH for real. We did practice. That's how we knew we got it down to 100 minutes. We did, shortly after hostilities ended, we were going along through the desert in Iraq, and we came upon the 5th MASH, who had set up their hospital for real. They were receiving casualties, and we helped them out in their operating room. So we did see casualties. One of the things that needs to be emphasized is when you find munitions in the environment, leave them alone. There was a pediatrician who picked up a landmine and brought it into the armored personnel carrier that he was doing sick call out of, set it in his lap, and when he set it in his lap, it blew up, killed everybody inside the armored personnel carrier. you don't bring that stuff with you. You leave it alone. But, you know, even educated people need to hear that stuff over and over again.
So after Saudi Arabia, you came back to the United States.
Correct. Came back to Fort Carson.
Okay. You were still in training or not training, but you were still in the military.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, I was at Fort Carson. I was working in the operating room there. It was a very busy 9-bed operating room. The only thing we didn't do there was open heart surgery, and we didn't do neurosurgery.
And who were you performing for? Who were you?
The Army.
Okay.
Yeah, working for the Army. I was a 66 Echo.
Okay.
Operating room nurse.
And then how long were you there for?
I left Fort Carson in the fall, early winter of '92, and went to Fort Sam Houston and to the advanced course. And after the advanced course, they selected me. I was one of 6 nurses that year that went to the Advanced Trauma Life Support course. It's the same course that the Army surgeons go to for trauma training. And then I was transferred to West Point. And while I was at West Point, they sent me to Somalia, and I got a chance to use that trauma training every day, almost every day, for the 6 months we were there.
Talk to me more about Somalia.
I was with the 46th Combat Support Hospital. I was initially supposed to deploy with the unit when they went over, and they held back half of the unit because they were doing what I call hearts and minds operations. They were feeding people, providing health care to the local Somalis, and then they switched their operations to one of nation building, and they went after Adid, the big warlord, and that's when the Black Hawk Down scenario happened. And one of the things that I learned, and I was told to, when all that happened, I was given 24-hour notice to be on a plane headed to Somalia. And I went from West Point to Fort Dix, drew my weapon, my protective mask there. I got on a plane in Dover, Delaware with a platoon of Marines. I was the only Army person on that aircraft, and we went to Somalia. Flew into Mogadishu, and at the beginning of the movie Black Hawk Down, that's the airfield we flew into. One of the things I found out while I was there was that the professional staff for the operating room was all on R&R in Mombasa, Kenya. Nobody had bothered to coordinate, with medical support because they thought it was just going to be a cakewalk. In and out, 30 minutes, be done with it. They never anticipated the scenario. It just wasn't in their paradigm that, the Somalis could strike back in the manner that they did. So we did a lot of trauma surgery, like I say, almost every day there. One of the other things we did was we had a lot of people who were burned. What the Somalis would do was they would, if you look at what's going on over there, they had large gangs that were heavily armed. They would mount a 50 caliber machine gun on top of a Toyota pickup truck and drive around and look for other gangs to fight and like that. If they found somebody from a different clan, they would usually set them on fire, pour gas on them, set them on fire, and if they survived, they came to either the Swedish hospital or our hospital, and we provided care for them.
Is that hard to see?
It's hard to deal with. You never get over the smell of burnt flesh. we had one little kid. He was 8, 9 years old. Um, he was burned over 90% of his body, third-degree burns. And when we left, he went home. He was discharged from our hospital just prior to us leaving. He was a success story in that, number one, he survived, because most people would die from infection, being burned that much. But he went home. Now, what happened after we left, I have no idea. But the Swedish hospital, the Moroccan hospital, and us, the American hospital, were the ones that I primarily dealt with. When we left Somalia, I had made friends with a pharmacist from the Moroccan hospital, and made arrangements for all of our supplies from the operating room to be transferred to their hospital, because they were going to be staying there permanently, from what I understood. And so talked to the hospital commander, and he agreed, rather than destroy it, at least somebody would get some benefit from it. And so that was a great humanitarian effort that was made for the Somalis on the American people's behalf. So that was, I felt that was pretty good, and I had a little bit of a hand in making that happen. And so,
what was your experience with the Somalis as civilians?
The Somalis were beautiful people physically. They were just impoverished, no education, because we were set up on the university compound, and they stripped everything of value, including the wire, the electrical wire, anything that could be sold to buy bullets, so they could shoot each other. It's like, we don't need to be involved in somebody else's civil war.
Right.
And so, but to get along with them, it was great. And we would do what I considered, it was a joke amongst us, we would do what is known as Operation Inflict Health. And what that was, a Marine group from the USS New Orleans would do an assault on a village, round everybody up. We would set up tents, and they would be walked through the healthcare tents, and we would give them health care, treat them for whatever medical problem they had. If they had teeth that needed to be extracted, we did that. If they needed shots, we did that. If they had an infection, we treated them. If they had a broken bone, we fixed it. And whether they wanted it or not, we did it for them. Mm-hmm. And so that's why we called it Operation Inflict Health. And when I say we did an assault on the village, it's not the typical, shoot 'em up kind of assault. This was, yes, they walked through and kind of ushered people towards the tents, and we fed them and did those kind of things.
When you said that you jumped off, was it a moving truck and broke your heel? Was that in Somalia?
No, that was in the first Gulf War.
Oh, okay.
But
what happened there?
We were the truck was moving. We were moving, in the process of moving from Cement City up to our just south and east of the town of Rafa. We were moving our unit up there and all of our supplies. I jumped out of a 5-ton truck and the truck, we were at our destination, and we had to start offloading. So I just jumped off, and the tailgate went down. I jumped off and landed on a rock and broke my heel. And just the fortunes of doing that. I mean, it could have happened here in the United States, right. But oh well. But going back to the people of Somalia, they're very pleasant. They're just like you and me. They want to live and have a family and do all those kind of things, and they don't want to get tied up in all the political fighting that goes on. And,
that give you extra motivation to be over there?
to help,
Yeah.
the common people, yeah, absolutely. And I enjoyed taking care of people. I mean, as a nurse, my sole reason for help going into medical in the first place was I like to help people, and that's one way I could do it. I enjoyed doing that, as a Navy corpsman and as an EMT on a volunteer rescue squad before I came in the Navy. So, I liked that aspect of it. Blood didn't bother me, and it was interesting. It was different every day, and something new. Learned a lot. Worked with a tremendous group of highly talented and highly skilled surgeons, nurses, techs.
Did you guys become a close group of friends?
Oh yeah, tight.
Yeah.
The relationships that you develop in the military, you value those. In some respects, they're tighter than your own family because you shared the opportunity of losing your life together. You look out for one another, like you wouldn't experience any other way. I would do that again in a heartbeat. If called to serve, I would go again, just because I know the quality and the caliber of people that I'd be working with.
Was there ever a point in time where you were afraid that you might not make it out alive, or one of your friends might not make it out alive?
Yes, I had prepared for that scenario. We had thought that the Iraqi army was going to be a formidable force, and I thoroughly expected to die over there, primarily from chemical weapons, because Saddam had demonstrated, his willingness to use chemical weapons against his own people. So, I didn't know for sure, but I had expected that I might not make it back. And there are different scenarios that you walk yourself through. What would you do if? And I had already walked myself through all those different scenarios, and I had a plan of action for what I would do should any of those come up. But did I want to come back alive? Absolutely. But I was prepared for the opposite if it happened.
And how long were you in Somalia for?
We were there for six months. It was a 6-month rotation. For all the units, and it was kind of interesting because the unit, the 46th Combat Support Hospital, relieved one of the OR nurses in that unit I served in Desert Storm with. Her name was, I knew her initially, her maiden name was Bjornstad, Kim Bjornstad, and she married a chopper pilot from that she met over in Saudi for the first Gulf War, and her married name is Kurtz, and so it was kind of neat. In between going or coming back from the first Gulf War and going to Somalia, they had gotten married, and
Oh, wow.
it was kind of neat. You never expect good things to come out of a war zone, but this was one, and I'm glad for them.
So at the end of that 6 months, did you know in the beginning that would be definitely when you were coming home, or you weren't?
No. From Somalia, yes. From Saudi, we expected to be over there for a full year.
Okay. So when you came home from Somalia, what was your next move?
Well, I came back to my assignment at West Point. I left West Point, where I was an OR nurse there, they sent me TDY, temporary duty assignment, to Somalia, and I left after the first football game in '93 at West Point, and was gone before the second game that year. So I got a chance to watch one football game anyway.
Okay. So when you came home, was it hard to get back, back to used to civilian life?
Well, get back to used to civilian life. I was still in the military, so
well, after you.
Yeah, I understand, but the coming back from the first Gulf War and Somalia both, I had a lot of trouble sleeping through the night, and even today there are times that I have trouble sleeping at night, and it's I have to have some noise on, and I turn the TV or radio on, and have some turn it down low just so I can hear a little bit, and that lets me know that I'm back in the States and everything's safe and no problems. We had for the first Gulf War, there was a situation where the Iraqi army had an armored column that came upon a group of Marines, and the the gun turrets were pointed north. It was an indication that they were going to surrender. Well, they came in, turned the turrets around, and they shot up the Marines, and that was, I think, 30 minutes north of where we were when all that happened, and that put a good scare into us. And 2 days after that event, we were at the port of Dammam, getting our supplies, our vehicles off the ship that brought them over. And that night, my battle buddy, Terry Roach, he was an anesthesia provider. He and I were pretty tight through the war. We looked out for one another. He stayed behind to watch all of the stuff in our tent. There were 6 guys to a tent, and these were small tents, and so we had cramped living quarters. But he stayed behind to watch our stuff. That night, it was a moonless night, and Terry had turned in. He was sleeping on his bunk. Now, Terry was an infantry platoon leader in Vietnam prior to getting out and going to anesthesia school as a nurse, and so he understood a lot of different things about being in a combat zone. He was suddenly woken by the sound of a 50 caliber machine gun going off in long bursts, and he rolled over off his bunk and onto the floor, and I'll clean up what he said. They're at the wire. He's thinking the worst, and this is something the Army does, which kind of blows me away a little bit. They give us a weapon to carry, but they won't give us any ammunition, and especially when the enemy was within 30 miles of our position, we had no ammunition to defend ourselves. There was the 5.5 Cav cavalry unit was the one who was manning the positions, and it was their guys who were firing that night. So the 50 opened up, and then there's all kinds of M16 fire, tracers going down range and all that, meaning for outside the perimeter. We found out the next night, Terry and I were on the Scud Watch, and we talked to the guy at the headquarters shack and asked him, what happened the night before, and he told us that the guy who was manning the 50 was an 18-year-old kid. Now I say kid because he's younger than me. 18-year-old kid. He saw something move in front of him. He challenged it. It stopped, and then it moved directly towards him. He challenged it again. It stopped. Now he can't see what it is. All he can tell us is something out there moving. It moved towards him again. He challenged it, and it stopped. And he said it was about 10 yards out now. He said it moved towards him again, and that's when he opened up. And everybody was firing at that point, and then nothing happened. I mean, if it was an Iraqi soldier, they could have thrown a grenade into wherever he was at, and caused all kinds of problems. Anyway, they waited till sunrise, and what they found the next morning that what was moving was a dog, and the dog didn't make it. But anyway, but that's a scary situation.
So why would they give you guns but not ammunition?
Good question. It makes you wonder. Did they think we were going to shoot one another, with it?
Or then maybe they thought you would fire when we were not supposed to, or.
Right. Well, there were a lot of people in medical units who don't handle weapons, every day. Having been enlisted prior, I had an opportunity to handle weapons, and I knew when and where to put my finger. You don't keep your finger in the inside the trigger guard until you're ready to pull the trigger. And you don't keep a round in the chamber until you're ready to shoot it. But some people don't know, and that's probably why they didn't give us ammunition.
Was there a point at any time where you kind of realized, we're different from other people? We have a different calling?
Yes. For the first Gulf War, we got an opportunity to go into the town of Dammam, and they had a Safeway there, Safeway grocery store. I mean, it's like walking into an American city. We went in there, and yet they had the deli area. They had American meat and cheeses, and yet they had the Saudi foods, meat and cheeses. You could go in there and get all kinds of stuff. Now, of course, we wanted American kind of food,
right.
Chips and salsa and all that kind of stuff. And so, we could buy that. We had one opportunity to do that. It wasn't, an everyday occurrence. So that was different in that respect. I had an opportunity to meet the mayor in the town of Rafah, and he was trying to convert people to Islam. They also had lots of different opportunities when we were waiting to leave. There was lots of opportunities to witness the beheadings that they would do, and for different capital crimes, and then they would also cut off the hand of somebody that stole something. Do you want to pause that, or?
It's okay when they edit the video.
Okay.
That's fine.
Hey guys, you're making too much noise.
It's okay.
Anyway, they have a different set of moral values. I mean, they are following. I learned, that they follow strictly what the Old Testament says. An eye for an eye, and you do something that they consider wrong, a sin in the Old Testament, you paid for it, just like it says in the Old Testament. We don't do that here in the United States. We're a little more lenient in that respect, but anyway.
So are there any other stories you'd like to add?
Well, I have more sea time in the Army than I do in the Navy. I have 8 hours of actual underway sea time in the Navy aboard the USS Fisk, which is a guided missile destroyer based out of Bayonne, New Jersey. I reported on board on a Friday. We were supposed to steam on a med cruise, Mediterranean cruise. On Monday, we left port, and about an hour out of port, we had an explosion below decks, and we went dead in the water. And they made repairs. We turned around, went back to port, and the ship got orders for dry dock, and I got orders to the Marines. So that was my extent of actual underway sea time. And then when I was with the 46th Combat Support Hospital in Somalia, I was stationed aboard the USS New Orleans, which is an LPH, basically a landing platform for helicopters. There's 3,000 Marines on board, and I spent 10 days aboard the New Orleans, and that was an exciting time. I say exciting because they sent a Chinook helicopter. That's a banana-looking helicopter. It's got 2 rotors up on top, and they sent one out to our hospital. Now, outside of our emergency room was our landing zone. On the far side of the landing zone for helicopters was a 12-foot wall, and on the other side of that wall was downtown Mogadishu, and we were constantly taking sniper fire. The day before they came out to get me, to bring me out to the New Orleans, we had taken sniper fire right about the same time that the chopper came to pick me up, and the chopper set down, and I climb on board, and I grabbed the crew chief, and I said to the crew chief, "Did anybody tell you that we took sniper fire at this same time yesterday from across the wall over there?" And he said, "No." And he said, "Sit down." So I sat down, buckled up, because I knew what was going to happen. They lifted, brought guns to bear to that side of the wall, and we stayed about 20 seconds more, and we were gone. And we went to a more secure LZ in the compound area that we were in, the UN compound, and then we came back to our LZ to pick up. We were supposed to pick up a doctor that was supposed to go with us. He was a no-show. We were there short time, seconds, and then we were gone. And I went out to the ship, and when I got on board the ship, I was invited to the captain's mess, captain's dining area for supper. And it just happened to be a Steel Beach day, which means they were barbecuing steaks, they had corn on the cob, all that kind of stuff. So I'm eating in the captain's mess, and the captain comes in, and I say to the captain, I really appreciate, you rolling out the red carpet for me. You send this really nice limo to come get me to, out and invite me to this really nice steak dinner. I'm not eating MREs tonight, I'm eating steak. It's really nice of you to do all this just for me. And the captain laughed, and he said, "No, this just happens to be a normal evolution. You just timed it right." So it was fun.
That is funny.
And then I remember while on the bridge one day, they have what's known as big eyes. Big eyes are a set of binoculars that you can see a really long ways with. And I was able to find our compound in Mogadishu with big eyes. I could tell enough. Could see the American flag flying and all that. And we're, what, 12, 15 miles off the coast, something like that. And then I was scanning around Mogadishu, and I saw this huge explosion. It filled my field of view in the binoculars with this flash. And I go, and then I could see the smoke afterwards, and I pulled it back, and I could see the smoke rising in Mogadishu where I was looking. And when I get back ashore, I found out that they had found a weapons cache and they had blown it up. Well, I get to witness it for real, and at a distance. But it was neat to see. You know, I hadn't seen that before. But the thing about being in the military that I have to say is it was a pleasure and an honor to serve, and I've seen more of the world. Compliments of the military. I got a chance to walk Old Testament ground. The only thing I would have liked to have done while we were over there is gone to Israel. I would have loved to have gone to Jerusalem, and maybe the Lord will allow me to go there at some point. But it was a pleasure to serve, and I worked, like I say, with some of the neatest and best people you could work with. Pardon me. One of the things that happened to everybody for the first Gulf War, everybody had a call sign. Mine was hi-fi, because I brought a stereo system to the desert. I brought a set of Bose speakers, an AM/FM radio, a tuner, a CD player, and a cassette deck. And I played for Reveille every morning. I played AC/DC's The Razor's Edge. The first three songs, Thunderstruck, which is what the Iraqi army was, Money Talks, which is why we were there, and Fire Your Guns, which is what we were doing. And that you know, that was fun. I mean, you know, music was a big diversion for me, and different music for different surgeons was important. Joel Clary was an orthopedic surgeon, and whenever he would enter an operating room, I would turn on George Thorogood's Bad to the Bone, and he just ate that up. You know, whenever he heard that kind of music, when you know coming in, we had a good day. And that, you know, keeping your surgeon happy, anticipating you know their needs, that you know that all feeds into the quality of care that the patients get.
Right.
If a surgeon's happy and is having a good day, everybody has a good day, but especially the patient. And that's what it's all about, doing what we need to do to make it a good day.
Yeah. Well,
thank you.
Thank you. That was great.